Avenue Radio World. You'll hear interviews, panel discussion, issues that impact your life on a daily basis. Celebrate Black History Month with Rainier Avenue Radio. Oh, did I mention? Every Wednesday night, live musical performances from the historic Columbia City Theater. Rainier Avenue Radio celebrates Black History Month all month long. Interviews, icons, celebrating the history of Black Seattle, community leaders, community activists. In 1852, Seattle's first Black resident arrived. National viewpoints. In 1943, Harborview Hospital hired its first hosted by Rick Dupree, Tina Marie, and me, Tony B. In 1961, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. made his first and only Seattle appearance. Did I mention every Wednesday in February, every Wednesday night, in celebration of Black History, live musical performances from the historic Columbia City Theater. I'll say it again. Every Wednesday, live musical performances from the historic Columbia City Theater in celebration of Black History Month. People you know, and some you may not. It's a celebration of Black History Month on Rainier Avenue Radio World.
Sunday nights from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's K-Fox Night Beat with DJ Nastiness.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music. Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Ugandan authorities appeared to cut off internet access in the country on the eve of a tense presidential election. A lawyer for leading opposition candidate Bobby Wine said all contact had been lost with him, Rodney Muhumuza, with AP reports. The U.S.-based counsel for Wine, Bruce Afran, told reporters that the candidate, quote, is now in his compound with his wife and a single staff member who is unarmed and is not security personnel. Security and police are stationed outside his home and effectively encircled it. Afran said he feared Wine, a popular young singer and lawmaker, will once again be arrested. He warned that, quote, we're going to see protests on the streets if they believe longtime President Yoweri Museveni is declared the winner of vote because of fraud.
And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check us out on social media. Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and on Twitter at Rainier Ave Radio.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio. This is Afternoons with Monique, recording live in Seattle, Washington, every Thursday at 1 p.m.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Monique Lee with Afternoons with Monique. We are on the show with David Della.
Hi.
Good afternoon, David. How are you today?
Well, doing fine. Great. Good day. Yeah.
Yeah. Today on Rainier Avenue Radio, Afternoons with Monique show, I have the pleasure to invite an old friend and I would say an old friend of mine, David Della. He had been in business, in civic and political arena as a consultant, as an expert, and a servant. For when I first know David, he was serving the community in the role of Seattle City Council. And that was back in 2000. What year was it, David?
2003.
Yeah, something like that. It was a long time.
Yeah, long time ago.
Yes, and we stayed in touch, and over the years we've attended. Mostly I attended his events. He's also a past president for Seattle International District Rotary Club. So welcome to the show, David.
Thank you for having me on, Monique.
Yes, it's my pleasure. So, it's a 30-minute show, and we'd like to get to know a little bit about your history and your past work with the city of Seattle, as well as the Washington community. So, let's start with where are you from, and how long have you been in Washington?
So, Monique, I was born and raised right here in Seattle at the old Providence Hospital on First Hill, and grew up in the industrial area, near Georgetown.
Mhm.
Come from a working class family. My father immigrated from the Philippines, and my mother was from Hawaii. Both of them worked all their lives, raised 9 kids, including me.
Wow.
And so I've been here all my life. And actually, I've worked in. I'm on what I consider 6th career. So I've worked not only in public service, but also in private sector, nonprofit, and in a number of community roles doing public service. So it's been a
Wow.
long time, yeah,
I
and
see.
continue to do so.
So you came from Hawaii and Filipino background. Are you in
Yeah.
touch with the Filipino community here?
Oh,
I
very
would
much.
imagine.
A long time ago, even before I was in office, I was very active in the Filipino community as an officer at one point of the organization, community
Mm-hmm.
organization, way back in the 80s, 1980s, and stayed involved with them as they evolved from a social organization to really developing programs. And now they're building housing down in South Seattle. They're building what they call a Filipino village, which will
Mm-hmm.
include 94 units of affordable housing for seniors. And they're going to have a computer lab for young people and continue to provide food services and education services. So that organization has evolved and still not as involved as I was in the past, but more now supporting their efforts and doing whatever I can do to donate. Yeah.
Well, we just passed Martin Luther King a day, and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
the first guest after that. And I read in your signature you had a line from him. Can you tell us what your signature say?
It says the full measure of a man is not measured in times of comfort and but measured in times of controversy and challenges. And
I
that's always been, that's my Martin Luther King, by the way, is my always been my favorite national kind of mentoring kind of the work that
figure.
he's done with nonviolence, and then his quotes. But that particular quote really talks about what I've been through and what I continue to see as important is, people get measured not in times where it's easy, but in times where it's challenging and there's a lot of controversy, and you're measured by how do you, one, survive from that, and the other two is how do you help people and others and yourself get through that and come out the other side better. And I've always been about whenever it's my time to leave this world, and we all do that. I just want to be known for having made enough difference to leave the world better than when I came in. Yeah.
Well, what impressed me about you when I first met is that you're one of the few Asian Americans that were in a public service role as a high profile, influential person. And that's why I wanted to stay in touch and learn, how you progress and all your different contributions to the community. But as I read your bio before serving in the city council, you were also the executive director for Asian American. What's this?
The Commission on Asian
The
Pacific American
commission.
Affairs.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a state agency that is part of the governor's cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
It was formed in 1974 as an agency to advocate on the needs and issues of Pacific American statewide in state government. And so that included legislation programs, but also including Asian Pacific Americans into all levels of services in state government. So I was the director there for about 8 years. So yeah.
Right. So, you've always been public service in one form or another. Yeah. And I'll get to the consulting bit that you're doing now in a little bit. But, I'm always very curious how other Asian Americans of influence like yourself get to those positions, because you don't see a lot. I mean, we see some now with, ever since Governor Gary Locke was in office, there were, more Asian Americans getting involved, and that, that possibly was supported by former Governor Locke. So how did you start? I mean, did you go to the UW? How did your public service start?
I look at public service in a general sense. I mean, you could do public service either in a position, or you could do public service as a community activist. And I actually started my public service in high school as a student activist. I went to Cleveland High School in South Seattle, and believe it or not, at one point, Beacon Hill and Cleveland High School was not majority minority. It was actually an Italian neighborhood.
Really?
And we were when we moved up there in about 1965, when they built I-5. We moved up to Beacon Hill. We were one of the few minority families on Beacon Hill. And when I went to grade school, which is St. George on Beacon Hill, and then Asa Mercer in Cleveland High School, it was a majority Italian. And but in our high school, there were some issues involving race back then, and I remember getting involved in a meeting with the principal and demanding minority studies. And we actually built a Black Student Union and an Asian Student Union at the same time. And I was involved in that, and really advocating for, making sure that our histories were also reflected in the books, but more important, that we were treated equally in the schools. And that translated into, when I went to the University of Washington, I got involved and actually chaired the Asian Student Coalition and the Filipino Student Organization, demanding the same thing, but at the higher education level. And then that translated into doing community work in the Chinatown International District at the time when the county wanted to build a dome stadium. And, our seniors and our history and culture was being threatened by that. So there were marches down there. There were marches down there to City Hall and the county and the state, demanding funding for low-income housing and services. And so got involved in a lot of that while still going to school and being active. So, that student organizing translated into community organizing. And also, I followed my father and my brothers to work in the Alaska fish canning the salmon canneries in Alaska, and got involved in a discrimination lawsuit in 1972 against the salmon canning industry for discrimination. They segregated us based on housing, jobs, and mail and everything based on race. And so we filed 3 civil lawsuits. I was a plaintiff of one of them, Ward's Cove, and it was the largest lawsuits filed against an industry back then by minority groups. It was really Filipinos and Alaska Natives class action lawsuit, and so that translated into getting involved in labor organizing, and so we had to organize the community around our lawsuits.
I have a question. How did that lawsuit turn out? Did you guys prevail? How did that?
There were 3 lawsuits. 2 of them settled. The one that I was involved in never settled. The company fought back hard with a lot of money, and they were never able to settle it. Our case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and it was part of the 1990 Civil Rights Act legislation that went on when I forgot who was in office, the president, and we went all the way to the United States Supreme Court.
Wow!
And the Supreme Court threw it out, and then so we tried to make a difference on that. And it happened at the last minute. The industry lobbyists lobbied the White House and the Congress to pass the bill, excluding only the 2,000 Ward's Cove workers out of that. In other words, the 1990 Civil Rights Act was passed. The only workers in the country that were not covered under that were the 2,000 workers under Ward's Cove, which I was part of.
Right.
So if you look it up, it's a pretty famous history case. It's called Ward's Cove versus Antonio.
Interesting.
About county workers. Yeah. And so that got me into labor organizing. And we went from that into really working to reform the union that represented us up in Alaska. It became a corrupt union. It was a progressive union back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. In the 60s, it fell into corruption in the leadership, and we went back in to reform the union to strengthen our case against the industry. And by the way, the leadership of the union was also very friendly and supportive of Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos in the 1970s.
Really?
And so some of the issues that we were involved in around labor and the Philippines intersected in that union. And as a result of our efforts, we did make progress, a lot of progress. And in 1981, my two best friends and colleagues, Selmy Domingo and Gene Vernis, were gunned down in the Union Hall on June 1, 1981, in broad daylight. It was a message, not only we threatened the union leadership, but more important, we threatened the Filipino dictators' leadership in the Philippines. Because we're also talking about workers' rights in the Philippines that were being threatened by that dictatorship. And so that all came to a head when our reform movement passed a resolution in our international union to send a delegation to investigate and to come back with some, damaging findings. And so the dictatorship found out through our union leadership, president, what we were doing, and a local gang was sent in to murder my friends. And by the way, I was late for that meeting. I was supposed to have a meeting with them. I was late 20 minutes and I was stuck in traffic. Wow. Had I gotten to the meeting on time, I probably would not be here talking to you.
Oh my gosh,
so that led me into a labor organizing, where right after that murder, I was part of a team that went back in literally before the blood dried on the Union Hall floor, and we went in and continued the reform and actually took over the leadership of the union 2 years after that. And all the gunmen, including the union president, we also filed a movement called Committee for Justice for Domingo Vernis, filed a lawsuit, a civil lawsuit against the Marcos dictatorship.
Wow.
And we got a settlement out of federal court, and the families got a settlement for that. But in the meantime, we also were able to take over the union and take out the old leadership and restore the union reform. And I did that work all the way up until 1989, where I was asked by then Norm Rice, who just got elected mayor, to be part of his staff. And so I went from union organizing to Hall, and I served as Norm's deputy chief of staff when he was mayor back in 1990 for one term. And then I went to work for Governor Mike Lowry and Gary Locke as the director of the Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs.
1990 is when I first got here. I barely speak any English, and you were on your way in your political career in serving the community. That's pretty amazing. And on my bookshelf right now, I'm looking at a book.
And actually, it was Norm Rice. Yeah, actually, it was Norm Rice that encouraged me to consider running for office when I was working for him. Because I didn't even think about it, right? Because I was really steeped in the community and trying to do what I can to help the mayor, be very cognizant of community and stuff like that. And he put that in my head. And in 2002, 2003, I had the opportunity to jump in and actually do it. I first ran a campaign, I lost, and then in 2003 I won. And so then it went from there. Then I got onto the council.
What? 2002 you won, but the first time you ran, what year was that?
I think it was like about 2000, maybe 2001.
Okay, it's just like a year or two before that.
Yeah, and then so I didn't make it, and usually that happens if you're not known, and at that time we're all elected citywide, so it's hard to know someone that comes out of the blue to run, right? citywide.
Right.
And so for some people, it takes 2 elections to get in there.
Right. To
And
get.
it took me that to get in there and stuff like that. But
No,
in the
that makes
meantime,
sense.
it forced me to get deeper into the community and to do citywide stuff to get known in order to get elected. Yeah.
For sure. You are on Rainier Avenue Radio. We are a little bit past midway into the show.
Okay.
And I have David Della, an all-time friend and community leader, or former city council to the city of Seattle, current consultant for Greenpoint Consulting.
It was Green Shoots.
Green Shoots?
Yeah, I had a business partner, and we were working to do public affairs work, creating that connection between government and communities, and then it evolved into working with small businesses to help them, get access to resources to not only start but also build and sustain.
Right. That's right. Green Shoots Consulting, right on the screen right now. Tell us about that work. I know that when you stop serving in the city council, you have gotten into the green energy, environmental type of consulting, and it's been a while. So tell us how that has been going, and what are you guys working on?
So, so when I ended my service as a council, I went into green energy because that was a big issue back then, and there was a lot of money out there. It was during the Obama first years, and they put out a stimulus funds nationally to support businesses that were getting into green energy. And so what I did is I got involved in helping businesses that wanted to get into the green energy via solar, wind, or whatever kind of clean energy. I helped them, first of all, develop a plan on what they needed to do to get more energy efficient, and number 2, get access to the resources. And so I was able to work with a number of small businesses to get them involved with the resources. Did some work with some Native American tribes to get them into that, and then also community organizations in doing that. And then when a lot of that funding kind of dried up and there wasn't no longer the emphasis on that, got involved in really working with small businesses, minority businesses, to make sure that they needed whatever they needed to develop, but also to survive. And that gets us into current, which is really with the pandemic now and the whole racial reckoning. Small minority businesses are suffering the most. And so, still on the track, trying to figure out how do we keep those businesses alive? How do we keep them starting and keep them alive in an environment where their economic situation is being gravely threatened? And so that is still kind of the track that still trying to follow, but I'm trying to expand that into some larger community conversations that we want to have with all parts of our city and region regarding the issues that affect us. I think we're in kind of a triple crisis, right? It's the pandemic, it's the economic impact of that, and then the third is the whole issue of the racial reckoning and systemic racism that occurs in different systems. And how do you get people empowered into a conversation and empowered on providing solutions for those issues, and make sure that our leadership is on task with that.
Right. So your work with Green Shoots Consulting, how long have you started this organization?
So that's been 2 years, and by the way, that is transforming because the pandemic has taken a hard hit on our. Well, we've taken a hard hit because of the pandemic. So a lot of projects we're working on completed, and there aren't any new ones. So I'm in the process of looking in other directions to do the same work. But which I think is very much needed. And so, and really, I'm focusing now with some people on some of the political situations facing our city and our region. Yeah.
I know that you also are a long-term advisor and board member for United Health. What's your role in United Health?
United Way. I was
United Way. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I was director of community affairs and public policy back in the mid 1990s, up until I got elected to city council. And
Right.
so what I did is I was responsible for a team that allocated the money to all the different regions within King County, but more important, United Way back in the public policy and helped them develop a legislative agenda for both the federal and state and local levels.
But in that role, you probably have a lot of experience in terms of how allocation take place and what kind of criteria United Way would look at, and possibly could be very instrumental to organizations that's looking for funding from places such as United Way. So, one of the things that I enjoy about my role as an interviewer and a host is to get to know all the different guest capacities and past connections and history in order to guide the community. Some people would call me and ask me who I would know to do this or that, and I get a chance to now know that is something that I could, help people connect people with you for guidance and advice.
It helped me connect with the regional communities all over the region and the different organizations, because a part of the challenge is organizations have to present themselves in the way that they do and make sure that they get funding, and that might even include changing the criteria, right, or changing the way you apply for funding. And then we try to experiment with what we call venture funds to give funds out to organizations that would normally not get funding, to get them into the track of getting United Way funding. And I think now more than other times you got to really figure out how you experiment to get all the organizations that need that kind of help in the loop and having access to resources.
That's wonderful. I'm really glad that we have a chance to chat today. So our station manager, Tony Benton, this week is in Washington, D.C.
I know him.
To cover the inauguration and whatnot.
Oh, good.
And, I was asked to make an announcement to let people know that that's where he is. And next week, we are going to have actually another Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders in Philanthropy focus group called AAPIP. Have you ever heard of this group?
Yeah, you know what? When I was at United Way, I was part of that group.
Were you? Oh, wow. So I'm going to have, John Woo, Julie Lee, and Brandon Hattie from that group coming on our show next to talk about their service in the community.
I was there when they first started that group.
Oh, wow.
And I was at United Way, so I was part of the first group when they first started. They started back in the 1990s.
Well, we have about 30 seconds left. We want to thank you for coming on our show. Yeah, for being in an instrumental part of the Asian American community landscape here in Washington State, and serving as advisor and guidance and public servants in so many roles that you contributed. And I'm sure I will have you again on my show to pick your brain. And by the way, thank you for inviting me to come to your Rotary meeting today.
Thank you for being there.
Yeah, that was a very, very awesome presentation from President Marie. What's her?
Anna Marie Kase. Yes.
Anna Marie. Yes. So thank you so much for coming on our show. This is Afternoons with Monique, and you are on Rainier Avenue Radio. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you.
Have a good